back to another Unboxed Live. I am Catherine, and this is Susan Bryant, and we're going to be talking about one of the most hot topics that we are getting this season, and it's all about starting up a brand new business. And this is really applicable because Susan and I just did this. So we're going to walk through the pitfalls and the things that new entrepreneurs need to be aware of when starting out on their new venture. So, welcome everyone for joining us. We are so glad that you found us. Do us a favor. If you find this content helpful, please give us a thumbs up. It really helps push this message out to other viewers. So, Susan, how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and the Rangers just won the World Series last night. So super exciting.
Woo! It doesn't get much better than that, right?
Right. Super fun.
Yes. All right. So, strategic startups. This is something that entrepreneurs, between you and I, we call it paying the dumb tax. If you don't do it right, oh my gosh, you can absolutely pay the dumb tax. So, could you help us with some of the most common pitfalls that you see with new entrepreneurs as they're starting up their own businesses?
The number one mistake that entrepreneurs make, especially when it comes to accounting and taxes, is that they go to Google University and they read all this stuff, and they think in doing so that that generic information will somehow translate into their ability to understand how to apply that to their specific situation. And that is just not true. It is the area where I see most entrepreneurs make the biggest mistakes because they don't understand entity formation. They don't understand why an entity should be structured a certain way. They don't understand the tax ramifications of that. And they think that in reading all the articles that they get enough knowledge, and they do get a foundational knowledge, but it's certainly not enough to know how to apply it to their specific situation and all the other things that they've got going on in their personal tax lives. So that's just baseline. They just don't DIY that part. You've got to get the right help to make sure you're setting your entity up in the right. So, and we talk about this a lot, in just the whole like mentality of like, well, I'm going to save $500 or I'm going to save $3,000 or something. But what happens is it ends up costing you so much more in the long run. So it's like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of medicine. Is that the cliche? That's the same situation when it comes to getting help on the front end. There's a lot to learn in starting a business.
It's a lot more than going to the Secretary of State and filing an LLC. Is that what you're telling me?
A ton. I mean, we see people who set that up wrong. So yeah, a lot of considerations, and there's a lot of really sexy stuff out there. Like, oh, you've got to become an S corp, like if you start a new business, and that is a tremendous opportunity for when that's the right situation, but that's not always right. So again, it's you got to get the expert involved. Come to someone who can generate that type of advice for you, so that you are, confidently you're making the right decision when it comes to entity structure.
Yes, absolutely. I also we've experienced this with a client that we've been working with, where they're like, well, that's what works for my other colleagues in the same industry. Like, they get to take all these deductions, they get to do all of these things, and it's like, well, no, not every single solution applies broadly like that. So what we're going to be really focusing on now is the strategy behind getting your entity set up correctly from the very beginning. So, one of the pain points is self-employment income. Give us the skinny on self-employment income.
Yeah, so self-employment income is it's not a bad thing, but it's typically one of those things that we like to minimize in the tax world because self-employment income is both subject to federal income tax and self-employment taxes. And that self-employment taxes, most typically employees, people who have been employed in the past, like they had a W-2 job, are very familiar with this because they've seen it withheld from their paychecks in the form of Social Security and Medicare taxes. But when you're self-employed, you have to pay both sides. You end up getting a deduction for one half, but it's a way kooky calculation. But it is costly because now you're funding essentially both parts of that. So you are both the employee and the employer. So it is it can be a very significant, like, ouchie when it comes to taxes. So it's one of those things where we have to be very intentional about understanding what self-employment income is going to be generated, planning around it, understanding how to minimize it, evaluating the repercussions of that. Sometimes it's not a bad thing. But as we talk to all sorts of business owners who are starting out, sometimes you need income in order to be bankable, to get a line of credit, to get, future financing, to buy a house next year. Like there's all sorts of other things that have to be considered. A lot of times we find that people get so constricted in thinking about, like, I've got to drive down this self-employment income number, that they lose sight of the other things that are priorities in their lives. So while self-employment income can be very expensive from a tax standpoint, it can also help to achieve other financial goals. So that's, again, one of the things that we really spend some time talking about and thinking about.
Yes. Okay. Now you're a CPA. I can see a little sticker in the background. Yes, we all love our CPA. Absolutely. But what about the accounting records? A lot of the startups that we work with are like, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a couple of transactions here and there. At what point does it go from, where you need something like QuickBooks? At what point should that trigger happen?
I believe it should be happening from the beginning. So many times what we find with entrepreneurs is accounting is sort of an afterthought. Like it's like, I mean, we've looked at accounting records together and we're like, okay, so basically we know we have a lot of income, but we have no accounting records. So then we really cannot damage control on taxable income. We don't know what particular strategies we can pursue because we don't even know what's happened. So like there's all these other problems that come about when we don't have a good foundation in accounting. So, and yes, you're right. A lot of people are like, well, it's just a little bit, it's just, we don't have to really spend that much time on it, and I'll get to it. And like, I don't want to spend a lot of money on it. But it is the beginning point for all other things that come afterwards. It's just not something that you can neglect. And if your business is going to grow, it's one of those things that you've got to sort of like building a house. Like you're not going to build a house on on a muddy foundation, right? And it's just going to like fall apart. You're going to get a concrete slab and you're going to make sure that your house is on solid ground. The accounting is the foundation. It is that concrete slab. So having a solid chart of accounts, having a good month-end close process, getting financials on the monthly, and making sure that you've got daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual processes and checklists in place, that even if you're not doing it and you're outsourcing it, you're also creating a structure of accountability, of making sure that you're getting the information you need to run your business better. And it's accounting.
Yes. Okay. So the importance of having great accounting. Also with startups, one of the pitfalls that we see is I'm going to have all of these startup costs. So I'm just going to use my personal credit card and I'll figure it out later. And you're shaking your head. No, don't do that. Why is that a bad idea?
Yeah. Inherently, before you start a business, you are going to have to pay some things personally because you don't have a business yet. You haven't formed a legal entity. So there are a few things that you are going to have to pay in order to get the thing kind of up and running, right? That's just the nature of the beast. Like I got to pay an attorney to form the entity. Like I don't have a business bank account yet, so I can't pay it out of a business bank account for an entity that doesn't exist. So there are going to be a few things like that, but it's making that transition as quickly as possible from I've disperse some personal funds to get something up and running to immediately moving to a business bank account, business credit card, and segregating that business activity away from the personal as much as possible. I mean, accountants do not want to keep track of your personal charges, mingling that stuff. And you really don't want to have to pay an accountant to keep track of your personal stuff if you've kind of got all smushed together.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention come tax time, the amount of work that it takes to like parse this information. Like, was this business, was this personal? I mean, 18 months later, you're like, I don't remember. I can't remember what this charge was for.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that that I think is really important for people to sort of, it's almost like a reality check, like know yourself, right? And you know that if you keep it separated, it's gonna be a lot easier later down the road. And there's like a whole other set of reasons to do that, but it's just make your life easier by setting your accounting up right in the beginning and making sure that you're keeping the business stuff separate from your personal.
Yes, please. That'd be fantastic.
Yes, please. Exactly.
Yes, please. Okay. All right. So whether you are a seasoned entrepreneur, you've been around for a little bit and you're starting out a brand new venture, or you are brand new to this game, what are the things that you should be doing besides not going to Google, finding the right people, but like what kind of questions should you be asking the people that you're working alongside of?
Oh my goodness. There are so many questions you should be asking. Um, so outside of like my accounting processes and tax structure, what kind of planning do I need? Is this tax planning? Is it budgeting and forecasting? Is building relationships? Like who should I be building relationships with strategically? Banker, insurance. How does this change my estate planning? Um, Pricing questions, like how should I be pricing things? Are there better ways to set up my business model? So I mean, like it's a plethora of things that you really need to start digging into, and it's sort of layers. That what happens when I want to hire somebody? Is that a person an employee? Is that person a contractor? What happens when I want to buy a piece of equipment? How does that work? What's depreciation? How does that apply to me? How does it help me? Does it matter if I finance something, or does it like a piece of equipment, or does it change if I pay cash for it? Like there's a lot of questions. Most of the time, business owners don't understand the difference between all of those things. And for good reason. I mean, most times people are making a transition from being an employee to now being a business owner. And even in business school, they don't teach you that stuff. It does not exist. And the natural tendency is for people to be like, well, I'm going to go research on the internet. And again, it's just so general. It's almost overwhelming. It's very noisy for people when they receive like all these inputs and they're like, they still don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, well, that's really great. I've got all this information, but what decision is right for me? So meeting with someone, I think on the front end, but when you're starting a business is extremely helpful because you can spend a couple hours and just go through all those questions and make sure you've got a really solid base of knowledge. So even when something pops up later and you're like, oh, I need to hire somebody. Okay, I've got a little bit of a frame of reference of how to treat that individual from a contractor or employee standpoint. Or I've got somebody I can call to say, hey, I know I'm going to need help determining how to handle this. Like, help me to make the best decision possible. That's where I find that we have to spend more time with business owners on the front end, educating them so they know when to go ask for more help, or they know how to handle something in the future.
Yeah, and who can handle that question for you? A lot of the times it's like, who do I go to? I know that I might have an estate planning issue, but like, who would be really good to help me with the small business? Who can be really helpful with me where I'm at in my career? So the who is almost just as important as the how. Now, okay. Yeah. Question for accounting, like everything in accounting is fixable. We often joke like, thank God we're pushing paperwork and not saving lives. Like, oh my gosh. Right. But with that, some of these things that you've talked about are not fixable. So like if you do the S election as an entity, like can you do like a whoopsie doodle and like go back and fix it?
So this question comes up a lot, right? Like, can I change it? And I'm going to give a truly accountant answer. It depends on the situation. In that particular case, if you're like a single member LLC and you make an S election, you can't go back to a single member LLC. If you bust your S election, you revert back to a C corporation. So that's a lot of times people don't understand. Like once you make an election a certain way, the law is the law. Like that's again one of the things is like the Internal Revenue Code is tax law. It's procedural. There's a certain way of doing things, and we have to have a healthy respect for that and understand exactly what the consequences are when certain actions are taken. So, yeah, that again, this is why the prevention, the knowledge of understanding the what is applicable to you and how you should apply it to your specific situation becomes so critical. Otherwise, you end up with a bunch of costly mistakes. And that's what you're trying to avoid. You know, business owners, anybody who starts a business, they want to go further, faster. And the general like thing that I see is that what's standing in their way is accounting issues, tax mistakes, not understanding how to get the right help and the resources. They're trying to DIY stuff and it's slowing them down. Like you're creating more problems for yourself, that more hurdles you have to jump over, the trial and error, instead of going straight to an expert, getting the information you need to allow you to travel much quicker on that road. So make investments in working with the right accounting, tax advisors, business advisors, you know, build the relationships because it will enable you as a business owner to just move more quickly towards those goals.
And everyone wants to be helpful. Like no one got up in bed every morning and was like, I know exactly how to run a business. Like we all had to learn some way. And what's fascinating is if you just go to a trusted advisor and say, hi, I need help, they will sit down on a Zoom conversation with you for an hour and help you. But it's asking the most beautiful questions. It's finding the right people and knowing what your boundaries are. So if you are Googling how to start up your business, if you were asking your neighbor on how they did it, you, my friend, need to schedule yourself with some sort of strategic guidance because you've already recognized you need the help. Now it's where do I go? What do I do? But you're exactly right. They want to get further faster. That is so great. Absolutely. All right. Anything else, Susan, that we got to know about with how to strategically start up your business for maximum success?
I'm a big fan of begin with the end in mind. You know, have a clear conception of what it is you're trying to achieve, both personally and professionally. Understand that your business is a vehicle for your personal mission to achieve those goals. Really establishing that purpose on the front end helps a lot to guide the decisions you're going to make in that business. So that clarity is key. Many times we find as business owners who are just on the hamster wheel of running a business and they've totally forgotten even why they're doing this. They've lost sight of the financial goals. They've lost sight of, you know, they're making sacrifices between, home and work. It's all consuming them and it leads to a lot of related problems. So I think that that's really important. The other thing that I would say is make sure that your spouse, partner, whoever is the most important in your life, that person is very informed about what those goals are and what you're trying to achieve. That alignment really helps because then you're gaining the support you need both at home and at work and in yourself to know why you're doing something, what the business represents, and you have a very clear conception. I mean, I had a meeting with some business owners earlier this weekend. This is a very common problem with business owners is they keep moving the needle. Like, okay, if I have $1 million in the bank, I'm going to be done. Now, I've got $1 million, now 2 million, now 10 million, now 25 million, and they keep moving the needle. So it's really gaining a lot of clarity around like, what are my real goals? And at what point do I say, okay, I've reached those goals. Or how do I change them and why am I changing them? And how do I garner the support of others to make sure that that's still in line with my personal mission and my business mission and the the things that I hold dear in terms of like my family and their priorities. So just getting all that stuff lined up and being really clear helps a bunch.
And you and I just went through this. We totally just went through this. How long did we spend on framework and planning and alignment?
Yeah, I mean, like months. Um, because it's so important to be very clear on the front end as to what you are trying to achieve.
Mhm.
And I think business owners just they kind of lose sight of it. They think it's a great way to make money, and a lot of times, in all fairness, people start a business because it's what they're great at, right? They're like, I'm really great at this. I can make money doing it. But they're usually great at it because they love it because it has some deeper meaning to them or some deeper purpose. So really, kind of like peeling back those layers of the onion and understanding yourself and having that awareness going into it will provide a lot of guidance along the way when you're making a business decision. Like, is this really true to what it is I'm trying to achieve? And just keep asking yourself that question. Now, it seems weird to be saying that in the context of accounting, but ultimately, the business is providing that financial security, the financial results. I mean, you're doing it because there is some type of financial reward for the risk you're taking. So they really do have to be aligned. Otherwise, you kind of get off course, and that's when I think people, especially business owners, they get dissatisfied or they get distracted, and more problems can help there.
I love that, you outline like this sounds weird to be talking about with accounting, but we get that all the time. Well, I've never talked to my CPA and my accountants before about marketing and strategy, and we get it because finance goes through everything. Okay.
Yes.
So our top takeaways are: one, spend some time dreaming, start with your why, get really clear on your purpose, get alignment at home and in the boardroom if you've got a business partner. All
Yep.
right. Then once you figure out how and what matters to you most personally, professionally, and financially, it is then finding the right partnership of advisors to help you get there. What's your favorite line? Further, faster. I love
Further,
that.
faster. I know.
Further,
It's
faster.
really, it's just one of those things where maybe it's just become more like evident to me the more I work with business owners. Like that's really that's what they want. They just want to get all the roadblocks out of the way. And they want to fly. I mean, it's like flying. It's very magical when you just green lights all the way. It
Mhm.
feels a lot different. And getting those roadblocks removed it's liberating. And I often find that once you sort of break down those barriers, that it leads to more innovation and more creativity, generally more money making. It's more, oh my gosh, the things get unlocked. It's like
Mhm.
um it's really magical, and it's different for every business owner. But when you take that weight away, I mean, it's like being, having something change your leg. I mean, when it's gone, I mean, you can run a
Right.
lot faster.
Right. You could start in New York and drive your way to California, or you can hop on a plane. What would you
Right.
prefer?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the other thing is that, it's difficult, I think, sometimes for business owners to kind of resist this urge to DIY things because they're scrappy. You
Yes.
know, that's the sort of the entrepreneurial spirit is like, well, I'll little redheaded, I'll do it myself. I can figure this out. And that is a big thing that's kind of born into entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
But for business owners, and when you make that transition, right, in a mental state, it's not doing it yourself. It's finding the right people that can help you to think through how to do it better.
Mhm.
And you can still take on a lot of tasks, but it is so much different when your knowledge is expanded so that you know what to do instead of you having to try to figure everything out.
Mhm.
It's a totally different process.
Yes, and total game changer. Absolute total game
Totally,
changer.
total game changer.
Ugh.
Absolutely.
All
So
right. Well, I feel like we have imparted a lot of wisdom. That was a lot of information. So I hope that you have found this helpful. Again, if you have, give us a thumbs up. And always contact us at unboxedadvisors.com. We love to